Hello, everyone. We are the Solar Broncos from Boise State University. We are here to present our project pitch for the Lummi Tribal Nation. So our team is, we have 4 team members on our team, plus 2 faculty advisors. I'm Grace Harker. I'm the project manager and in charge of the conceptual design. Next, we have Gage Kaprivnikar. He was in charge of distribution impact and the storage solutions. Next, we have Eric Kondrakik. He is in charge of the financial analysis, and we have Robert Guzman, who is in charge of the development plan. We'd like to thank our faculty advisors, Dr. Brian Higgins and Dr. Andres Delgado. They were a huge help to us. So some constraints and goals that we had during the process of designing our pitch is we focused on Lummi's goals in their energy plan to increase renewable energy production, reduce energy costs, improve energy independence, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and then also create jobs and economic development. Some constraints that we had while designing, there was a lack of available areas for ground mounts, mainly due to the forested areas and steep grades. For that section, we looked at the McKinsey community area as a possible ground mount, but looking at Google Earth, we saw that the grade of that area was at least like 13%, and for ground mounts, you have to stay below 5% grade. So we did not think that it was worth removing the trees and clearing the land. Another constraint is that the sections that the Lummi community wanted for battery storage had high 4-hour demand usage for the max demand. So for our battery storage, we recommend going with a more of an average 4-hour demand and like going over the critical loads rather than covering every single load during an outage to significantly reduce the battery storage size. As far as our solar and storage design overview, our number one, we started out with roof mount and tried to roof mount everywhere we could since that's the cheapest cost per watt. Since we didn't have any ground mounts, we next went to carport mounts and then finally the farm. So this is the list of our system sizing and the annual production. The highest, we didn't get to offset a lot of the casino since they have such a high usage. The best usage offset that we came up with was the Wexleyan community and the youth academy. And then the ferry, sewage, and Fisherman's Cove, we were actually able to offset 100% of their load using the farm as a way to offset that load. We avoided using the roofs or the building roofs for the ferry, sewage, and Fisherman's Cove because there was not a lot of available space and some of the sites were very shady. I also saw that in Puget Sound Energy's net metering, that if you have net metering at the site, that you cannot use another site to cover that load. So that's also why we avoided using those sections. So this is the approach that we took to the solar design with our number one goal of reaching the highest usage offset as possible each site to reduce energy dependence on the grid. The next was we abided by fire pathway and rapid shutdown requirements for the roof mounts. So that was another constraint because we had to have 3-foot pathways on each side of the array for the 3-foot pathway at the ridge. And then to get around rapid shutdown requirements, we used solar edge inverters with optimizers. That was mainly for shading and rapid shutdown. And then third was avoiding using the ferry, Fisherman's Cove, and the sewage treatment plant, which are served by agrivoltaics on the farm. I'm going to hand the slides over to Gage now.
Hi, so talking about the storage design, I'm going to pick up where Grace left off. The constraint was to have 4 hours of battery backup for during the highest, starting at the highest peak consumption over the course of the data collected. This led to very large sizes in the thousands of kilowatts, which we found wasn't super optimal financially, which I think Eric will talk about a little bit. So what we opted to do was we looked at the average middle third of the consumption that excludes the lowest and the highest consumptions and gets right at the critical loads. So the three locations that the Lummi Nation wanted to cover was the sewage processing plants, Little Bear Creek Elder Home, and the Wexleyan Community Center. These three locations are critical to them because you need to process sewage. The Little Creek Elder Home has medical devices that need to stay online, and the community center would be the shelter for all of that. So we decided to use 233 kilowatt hour batteries on sites. Having them be on site allows them to be easily maintained, easily accessed, and easily replaced in the 10 to 20 year timeline that they tend to take up. So for the sewage processing plant, that will require 3 on site, and that covers around 4.5 hours of consumption. Little Bear Creek Elder Home requires 2, and then that gives 5.5 hours of consumption. And then the Wexleyan Center requires 2. And then one consideration is that the batteries are for outages only. One analysis that we discussed doing but didn't end up doing for lack of time was looking at the average loads per month and seeing how that varies and using whatever excess energy was there to peak shave. But as they are sized now, they are only for power outages. Next slide. So distribution systems, we found there's not a huge impact on the distribution system, especially on the Lummi Peninsula. Only one location actually exports energies during peak production months, and that's the Wexleyan Community Center, like Grace mentioned. And during that time, you can see the picture on the top right indicates the 500 or the line that the Wexleyan Community Center is on, which only has 500 kVA of capacity. During the peak power production months, it's not anticipated that we're going to take up much of this line. It's around 30 to 40%. I'd have to look at the paper for the exact number. But considering that every other load on this line all consumes, this power that's transmitted to the grid isn't expected to feed back all the way to the power inverter. So no upgrades are necessary. For the farm interconnections, there are 3 different farm arrays that we talk about. This is near the casino, and they cover the Fisherman's Cove, the sewage, and the ferry. All of these lines are more than capable of handling the arrays on site. And then the thermal constraints and the voltage drop can be minimized via appropriate sizing. As many of the arrays that we designed have only rooftop, it's not a huge issue because it's on location and the metering's right on the side for most of them. And then for the ones that have agrivoltaics and the carport solar, the lines, depending on which ones you're using, vary between 1-aught and 3-aught size, which would need to be routed underground. Thank you. And I'm going to pass this off to the next person.
Hey, my name is Eric, and I'm going to be talking about the financial performance. So first, I wanted to consider only the PV solutions, and this is mainly using the Excel spreadsheets that were given to us. And as you can see here, the minimum PPA price that we calculated was, for some of them, around 10-11 cents per kilowatt hour, and the minimum we had around 5 cents per kilowatt hour, which is pretty close to what PSC, the schedule rate that they had. There was around 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So some of them are a little bit higher, but the escalation rate is around the same as the PSC. And we found the NPV customer savings was quite high for a lot of these. A lot of it is just mainly due to the fact that we actually, the average demand goes down through the PV panels when I looked at energy toolbase and all that. So actually the demand rate reduction, or the demand charge rate percentage, was actually quite high for the casino and for the sewage. They were, I believe the casino was over 100% and the sewage was over 200%, the demand charge rate percentage. So that's why they have the largest NPV customer savings. Now, as you can notice, the ferry and cove are in red. And yes, that means that it would be an NPV loss. But the reason why this is not really consideration is all that needs to be done is that some of the sewage needs to be reallocated to the ferry and to the cove. Seeing that the sewage has such a large NPV customer savings, it might be a good idea to maybe either rearrange the panels and how they're connected to each other. That might be just the best solution, seeing that we have that large NPV customer savings there. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so for here, like I said, the large peak demand savings for the PV. We also didn't really consider any project debt or loans, seeing that this was going to be considered in a $50 million portfolio. We decided that it would be best to give a best case scenario here to make it either a cash purchase or to worry about the project debt or loans rather in the $50 million portfolio than here, because they're more likely to get better loans that way. And as discussed, the 4-hour resiliency at peak demand found to be unreasonable. It was about $11.8 million in total cost. And the total cost for our solar panels, just the aggregate cost, was around 11.6 million. So it almost doubled the projects just trying to add 3 battery systems. So we decided to go for an alternative, more of a 4-hour resiliency at consumption mean. And this gets us around $1.8 million to just add in capital costs. Here I put the MACRS, the adjusted cost for those, and as well as the battery sizes here. This just seemed a lot more reasonable. And it seemed that it was going to be a lot more of a better solution, especially financially, seeing that $11.8 million is quite a lot versus something that's closer to the 1.8 million seems a lot more manageable and a lot more something that you can implement, especially on a reservation. Next slide. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the customer savings. Here we can see that, as said before, there are only 3 places, which are where the farm is, where the offset is over 100%. Here we can also see that some of these, the demand savings is $0. That's because for the Fisherman's Cove and the Youth Academy, they're on schedule rate 24, which has no demand rate charge. And the ferry just doesn't really have any efficiency according to Energy Toolbase to lessen the impact and the peak demand. But this was just a good way to show that like the sewage treatment plant gets a lot from demand savings because it has such high demand rates using schedule rate 26. And here you can also see the savings from the PV as well as the ESS, and the total we get is about $13 per kilowatt hour and saving about 2.4 million each year. Now I'm going to hand it off to Robert.
All right. A big part of the development plan, or a small part about it, is what is the community going to benefit from having these solar panels? As you can see in the images to the bottom left, you can see kids circled around looking at solar panels. They could use this as a great way to promote education. And when you promote things like solar energy, it's going to produce jobs, it's going to motivate the people within the community to become electrical engineers. People need to clean the solar panels, so it's going to create jobs as well. And people could just do that over the summer. We're also going to have visible solar inverters, and we plan on, okay, thank you, 2 minutes left. What was it? Oh yeah, we're going to have visible solar inverters, so it calculates everything that it collects over the years or season. And we were planning on putting a TV displaying the amount of electrical energy collected throughout the seasons, throughout the 4 seasons, and place that inside the community building. So people could go in the building and see, oh, how much are these solar panels offsetting? How well are we doing this year? And they could use that for educational purposes. Next slide. Okay. As you see, I just spread it out throughout 8 months. It's probably not going to take 8 months. It's probably going to take 6 months. The hardest obstacle is just getting approved for everything and getting all the license and permits necessary. The 2 sites that are going to take the longest are going to be the school and the casino, because that's where all the construction sites are going to be, and it's going to help aid all the other different solar zones. Like the school is going to help the youth academy. It's also going to help the elder home and the community building. The casino is going to focus mainly on the farm, and it shouldn't require that much time, but that's why it's going to take yeah, I'm done.
All right, thank you
So like
guys.
to add, for the development plan, Robert had a good idea of constructing during the summer while school is out for construction staging sites to avoid school traffic. So I appreciated that. I'll go to our next slide.
Yeah, questions?
Yeah, thank you. We'll take questions now.